Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to fix a poorly exposed image in Lightroom. Before we get started, let's look and see what we're trying to do in this video. And this is the original image, and this is the finished image. So what we're going to do is take the original and we're going to change the lighting in it so it looks a little bit more like this. And it's done very simply in Lightroom. I've gone ahead and created a virtual copy of the image, so this is the one we're going to work on. I'm going to open the basic panel here, and I can see here that this is an old process version, so I'm just going to Alt-click on this icon here, and that will bring it up to the 2012 process version. It's an old process version because this image was originally brought into probably Lightroom 3 many years ago. So let's get started, and the first thing I'm going to do is to bring back in the exposure on this building here, and I'm going to do that by opening up the shadows, because that's the problem with this image, is the exposure really is the wrong way around. We haven't exposed for the buildings, and if we had exposed for the buildings, then we would have blown out the sky anyway. So let's just adjust this so we're bringing up the exposure in the shadow areas. Now, to save the sky, I'm going to bring down the highlights. So I'm going to take the highlights down, and that will bring the detail back into the sky. Now, the upshot of having done those two adjustments is that we've flattened out some of the detail in the image. You lose a little bit of contrast anytime you open up the shadows, so we're going to build some contrast back in. We can do that one of two ways. Either I can just add a bit of contrast using the contrast slider, or I can do it using clarity. And clarity in this image will probably give us more value, because most of the tones are sort of around the mid-tone to shadow area. And so clarity will actually boost those. It gives us a bit more mid-tone contrast. I'm going to increase the vibrance a little bit too, because I'd like it to look a little bit more colourful. Now, before I go ahead and do any more fixes in the image, I want to adjust the whites and blacks. So I want a white point and a black point. Now, typically what I would have done in the past is to hold down the Alt key and just drag on the white slider until I start seeing some white pixels in the image. But there's a simpler way of doing that, and that is to double click on this icon here, this little slider here, holding down the Shift key at the same time. So if I double click on that, what Lightroom does is it picks that white point for me. And let's just have a look and see where that white point is. So I'm holding down the Alt key and just clicking here, and you can see that we've got no white pixels in the image. But if I go up to about 57, I'm starting to see white pixels. So Lightroom is protecting me from blowing out any white pixels in this image when I do that adjustment. And likewise, I can also shift and double click on the blacks. Now, I know that the black point for this image is probably around the middle, so let's just move it somewhere where it shouldn't be so we can see how this works. Hold down the Shift key, double click here, and it goes up. Well, in actual fact, -1 is the black point for this image. Again, holding down Alt just to see where Lightroom has fixed that black point. There are some black pixels around the bottom area in this image when I do that. So Lightroom's finding the ideal black and white points for me when I shift double click on either and both of the black and white sliders. So far so good. Let's go ahead now and straighten the buildings. I'm going to do that using lens correction. So let's go down here to lens correction. I'm going to basic. And these were new, I think it was in Lightroom 5 or maybe it was Lightroom 4, the upright options. So let's click auto. And what that does is straighten the image. We can choose full. And we've got vertical, level, and off. And I think for this image, probably auto or vertical are going to be the better options. I think I like vertical. I'm really trying to protect the very top of this image, because when I click on the crop tool, you can see that it actually hasn't cropped any part of the image, so there's nothing here for me to recover, so I need to be very careful that I don't lose the flag at the top. Now, a couple of things that I would do to finish this off, well, there are actually three things. I'm going to warm up this building here. I'm going to recover some of the detail here. I've just seen a fourth thing that we're going to do. I think there's a spot on my sensor here, so that's another thing. And when we get in up here, we're going to see that I have some chromatic aberration too, so we're going to fix that. So let's start with the building here. I was a little concerned that this was very yellow, and I thought it might look a little bit better if it had some pink tones through it. And I'm going to do that with the adjustment brush. So I'm going to click on the adjustment brush, make sure I have auto mask selected because I want to select the yellow areas. I'm going to click to pin down the brush, and I'm going to press O so I can see the brush as I work. And I'm just going to brush over the yellow areas in the image. And because I'm making sure that the X mark in the middle of this brush is always over a yellow portion of the image, Lightroom's pretty much going to do my masking for me. So when I have an area like this, which is a color that's different to the surrounding areas, generally the mask option will do all the work. Not really too worried about what's happening under here, as it's so dark, we're probably not going to see any effect of not doing a perfect selection there. I'm just going to finish picking up these little areas here. I think I've got a bit of cleaning up to do. When I need to clean up, I've got the eraser here on a very small size, and I'm just using the Alt key to switch to the eraser. It just makes things a little bit quicker. So that's pretty good a selection. So now I'm going to press the O key to turn off my overlay. And you can see here that I already had exposure and contrast and highlights set here from something else. I'm just going to double click on the words in each case to just zero these back, or what I could have done is just double click on effect because that would have zeroed everything back. And I'm going to build in some slightly orangey yellow here. So I'm opening up the color box and I'm going to choose a sort of orangey pink to warm this up a little bit. And then when I'm finished, I'm going to click done. I'm thinking also the overall image might look a little bit better if I warmed it up just a little bit. So I could warm it up a little bit by just taking it towards the positive temperature. Positive temperatures are yellower, so they're a little bit warmer. Now I want to bring back the detail up here in this dome, so I'm going to do the same thing. Again, with the adjustment brush, I'm going to pin it down, press the letter O to toggle on the overlay, and let's just go ahead and zero out these sliders by double clicking there, because that's going to stop us from seeing things that we don't want to see happening here. And again, I'm just going to select over this dome. Now, the last time I selected this, I did the exact same selection for the entire dome. This time I'm going to change that a little bit. One side of the dome is in a worse state than the other, so I'm going to fully select this side of the dome, and then I'm going to drop down my flow to maybe about 60% as I select the other half. That means that this side of the dome, this left-hand side, isn't going to be selected or affected by this adjustment in quite the same strength as the right-hand side. So let's press O to turn off this overlay, and now let's go and adjust this dome. And I'm going to do that by doing something like dropping down the lights. So one way of doing that would be to drop down the highlights. We just want to get a little bit more color in here, a little less blown out white. And I could drop down the exposure, but I think in actual fact I'm just going to get better mileage from dropping down the highlights. And if I'm happy with that, I'm just going to click done. While we're here, you may be able to see this little mark here. I think it's probably a mark on the sensor, and it is quite obvious, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'm getting rid of it using the spot fix tool. So I'm just going to click on that to select it, and then I'm just going to click over the top of this spot. And what I want is a brush that, or a circle here that is just a bit larger than the spot. And I'm going to click once, and Lightroom's picked a pretty good fix for that. So I'm just going to say, yep, that's fine, and click done. And as I promised you when we came up here to the top of this image, you can see this chromatic aberration. This is where the light is bending differently, and so we're getting these purple fringes around the edges on the image. That's not unusual. Sometimes they'll be cyan, sometimes they'll be purple. But Lightroom has a tool to fix that. So I'm just going to close down the basic panel here, and let's go to lens corrections because this is a lens issue. And we're going to color because this is a color issue caused by a lens. And the easiest way for me to solve this is just to grab this fringe color selector and click on some of this purple. So I'm just going to click here. And what Lightroom does is it samples the color underneath the cursor and it says, okay, so that's a color you didn't want. I'll remove that from the image. And it was also down the edges here, but it seems like just one click has solved that problem for me. Now, if I also had blue fringing, I could adjust that as well. I don't think this is blue fringing. I think it's more likely to be a sort of copper roof, but you can see here that there is a green sort of green-blue fringe and a purple sort of fringe that you can knock out using this tool. So I'm just going to click done. And let's just zoom out, and I'm thinking probably just a little bit more vibrance. This is just lacking just a little bit of punch here. Maybe a little bit more vibrance and maybe a bit of a hit with the tone curve. Let's see what medium contrast does. Well, that's a much nicer result. I'm really liking that effect. Since we came here to really improve this image, let's throw a little bit of extra contrast into it. So let's see how far we've come. This is the before on the image and this is the after, and they really are two very distinctly different images. We've really taken this image from this is a discard, there's no point in trying to save this image, it really is not working at all, to, oh wow, that's really quite a nice image. The other thing that we've done, which I really kind of like, is we've got rid of this down here. We did it through the lens correction, but one of the things that you'll find when you have photos is anytime you have anything that is textual, people's eyes will want to go there. And really, I don't really want people's eyes to go first to a sign in the bottom right corner of my image. So getting rid of that was really a bonus for this effect. So there's a way of recovering an image which was improperly exposed just simply by the camera not being able to cope with a very bright sky, and also an area of the image that was in a lot of shadow, and here we've applied the fix to it. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more video tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.